Artificial Sun, Chapter 6. The fledglings were quiet as they walked. They'd been trudging through the snow for a day and a half. They needed to put as much distance between them and the burnt forest as possible. They didn't stop to eat and were running low on water. Everyone turned as Neolani dropped to her knees, her body tired and weak. Althea and Ameera were on either side of her within an instant, helping her to her feet. The girl could barely rely on her own strength, and Althea could feel the shivers that ran through the teleporter's body.
You're okay. You're okay,
Althea whispered, but she didn't believe the words herself. The fledglings' hearts grew anxious the further they set out towards a goal so far out of reach. Slowly, panic began to set in. Bayard decided it was best for the group to avoid using their powers in order to avoid drawing any more attention to themselves. This meant that without Azura's fire, and without Ameera's rock tents, they were out in the cold, exposed.
She needs water,
Ameera said with panic in her voice. Bayard swallowed hard and nodded his head. Althea and Ameera lowered Neolani so that she was sitting.
We're nearly out.
He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. He removed his leather pouch filled with water from his belt and made his way towards Neolani. He held the pouch to her lips, and she chugged the water as if she'd never drank any before.
Slowly now,
He said, a gentleness in his voice. Althea couldn't help but look at Bayard. He had a tough exterior, but a softness in his eyes. He looked tired, and if possible, even more stressed than before. He was trying his best to keep the fledglings alive, and it was weighing down on him. While he wanted to avoid danger as much as possible, it was inevitable, and they weren't strong enough to fight. They couldn't train because they were too weak. They couldn't get stronger because they didn't have enough food. Flynn caught Althea looking at Bayard, and a twinge of jealousy and fear rose in his chest. Even though they only shared one kiss in the woods a little more than a week ago, Flynn couldn't help his feelings for her. They hardly spoke since their shared kiss. Both had seemed to decide that keeping the kiss a secret was the best decision for the time being. Flynn wasn't stupid. He could read Bayard's mind at one point. Althea ran through it most of the time, but that was in Etta Jean, where Althea would have never spared him a second glance. Out here in the wild, fighting for their lives, she just might have her head swayed.
She's cold,
Ameera said, her tone helpless. Everybody felt helpless at that moment. Nobody said it, but everyone thought it. They missed Etta Jean. Ambrose sat down beside Neolani, scooped her up, and held her close to his chest. He tried his best to ignore the pain coursing through his broken hand with every moment of undue pressure. He looked up at Bayard.
What are we gonna do?
Bayard swallowed and eyed each of his friends. Despair hung in the air, and while he wanted to give up, he couldn't. Instead, he delegated.
Ambrose and Flynn try to find a source of water and also collect wood for a fire. A river, a lake, there has to be something around here.
Bayard knew that if they looked hard enough, they could find a water source.
Azura, Neolani, Ameera, seek shelter for the night.
He addressed them, and they nodded tiredly.
Althea and I will hunt for our next meal. We need to build our strength.
Flynn frowned at this and shook his head.
I should be on the hunt with Wildcard. You find water.
he stubbornly said. Both of them knew that Flynn didn't want Althea alone with Bayard, but neither would say it out loud. Althea stood up from her position beside Neolani and crossed her arms over her chest as the boys stared one another down.
Do I not get a say?
She sounded annoyed, and the miffed expression on her face confirmed her tone. Who gave them the right to decide who accompanied her? Both of them turned to her, heads of gold and ebony. Flynn held a calm gaze, while Bayard's remained guarded, even when they glanced upon Althea.
I do not wish to hunt,
She admitted.
I want to stay with Neolani and find shelter. She's my roommate, my friend, after all.
She didn't want to go with either of the boys, especially when they were practically pissing on her to claim her. Bayard nodded swiftly before he looked at Azura.
Azura, I suppose you and I should hunt.
Azura allowed a small smile to graze her lips before she wiped it away completely and nodded.
I suppose so.
We can meet back here at sunset. Althea, Ameera, Neolani. Should the three of you find shelter, we will follow you there.
Bayard turned and began walking a few paces before footsteps stopped in front of him. He met Althea's gaze, but his eyes soon drifted to the wooden bow and 2 arrows that she held towards him.
Neolani's bow. Strike quick and strike true. You only have 2 shots.
Althea met his gaze once again, and his fingertips grazed hers as he took the weapon from her grip. He nodded curtly before turning towards Azura, who was a few paces behind him. Without saying a word, the ebony-haired boy turned and walked into the woods with the firebender on his heel. Bayard and Azura began their journey back to the spot they were to meet the other fledglings. They were carrying a limp deer between them, and Bayard couldn't help but feel proud of their kill. He knew that wild game was nearer than before due to Althea catching the grouse. He just didn't expect to successfully hunt a deer. He had almost no hunting experience. He had to admit that Azura's help was appreciated beyond measure.
We make a good team, don't you think?
Azura asked Bayard. Her hands were bloodied from when she had roughly pulled the arrow from between the deer's eyes.
I suppose we do.
Bayard admitted with a small smile on his lips.
We're all going to die out here if we don't do something soon.
We're doing something now. It's a start.
Bayard wiped the smile off his face. He couldn't help but feel offended at Azura's statement. He was doing the best he could as a leader, but he wasn't a leader. He was one of them, and the expectations they placed on his shoulders were weighing him down.
Let's take Neolani.
Azura spoke as if Bayard had made his irritation known.
She will be the first to go. Could be because of the cold, hunger, who knows? But she's weak, and weak people always die first.
Bayard ignored her. He knew that he shouldn't give in to her. She was taunting him.
Ameera would be next. I love the girl, but she's naive. She would be mauled by a bear, probably. Or maybe she'd eat a poisonous berry. Althea.
Enough.
Bayard said sternly as his eyes clouded with a bit of darkness. He did not need to hear how Azura thought Althea would die. He couldn't allow his mind to travel down such a path.
Did I hit a nerve?
She seemed to find joy in bringing out Bayard's subtle anger. Maybe the perfect Bayard wasn't so perfect at all. When he didn't respond, Azura decided to press further, even though she was huffing breathlessly due to how heavy the deer was.
Althea would die next. While she's a good combat fighter, Flynn is right in calling her a wild card. Her death would somehow be self-inflicted, even though it wasn't her intention.
Bayard said nothing, He didn't want to speak about this topic, but he knew Azura was only trying to get a reaction out of him.
Flynn would die not long after her. His emotions are too overpowering, and we all see the way he looks at her. He would never be able to handle her death.
She glanced at Bayard to see his reaction, but he remained expressionless.
So that leaves you, me, and Ambrose. I'm not sure how long Ambrose will last with a broken hand. Strength is supposed to be his power. If the two of us look out for each other...
We look out for everyone.
Bayard interrupted her, his gaze unwavering. Fear bubbled at the bottom of Azura's stomach as she held Bayard's intense, icy stare. Eventually, she looked away. Ambrose's face lit up as he looked at the deer that was caught. He was hungry, and a deer was a perfect meal at the moment.
Did you find shelter?
Bayard turned his head to Althea as he and Azura dropped the deer out of exhaustion. Althea nodded.
We found a cave not too far from here.
No water, though.
Flynn leaned against his sword that he dug into the ground. Bayard swallowed and nodded once, trying to hide the disappointment he was feeling.
Good job, you guys.
He turned to Althea.
Lead the way. It'll be dark soon.
Althea nodded and began walking with everyone following behind her. Ambrose had picked up the deer with his good hand and effortlessly threw it over his shoulder, while Flynn carried the pile of wood they'd found under his arm. Neolani was doing much better since she had some water and ate her final portion of raw nuts and berries, so she no longer needed any aid to walk. They walked in silence, and it wasn't long until they reached the cave Althea mentioned. It was a spacious cave. It reached a height of approximately 20 feet and a width of similar proportion. Most of the cave was exposed, but the closer the fledglings got, the clearer they could make out a large hole in the side, probably big enough for a few people to fit into. Flynn looked at the hole before he faced the others.
Want to see where that leads?
He asked.
After we eat.
Ambrose groaned as he threw the deer and Flynn threw the wood down.
Someone please make a fire.
There was movement coming from the hole in the cave, and with that movement came a slight noise. Althea was sure the others heard it, but when she took in their unchanged expressions, she realized that it had just been her. She was so hungry that she was starting to imagine things. Azura stepped forward, but then hesitated. She turned to Bayard and let out a defeated sigh.
It's too risky if I do it, I suppose.
Bayard nodded once before he leaned down by the wood. He carefully picked out the appropriate sticks from the woodpile and began working on lighting a fire while Ambrose started on skinning and gutting the deer. A half an hour passed before Ambrose finished. It took him extra long to work with a broken hand, though Bayard hadn't yet lit the fire. The fledglings sat patiently. Flynn, however, was impatiently leaning against the wall and tapping his fingers loudly against the hilt of his sword. The cave was dark, and if they didn't get the fire going soon, he was going to lose it. Eventually, the telepathist stood up straight and groaned.
Oh, give up already. You aren't going to...
Just as Flynn said this, a tiny flame sparked in the wood, and Bayard leaned back, relieved. Flynn curled his lips into a sneer and spoke mostly to himself. He said,
Maybe I should have complained half an hour ago.
It wasn't very long before the fledglings were eating. None of them remembered their manners as they wolfed down their portions. The deer was so large that they were unable to finish it before each of them filled their stomachs to bursting. They decided to keep the rest of it for the following day. Ambrose leaned back against the wall from his seated position with a satisfied sigh.
I haven't eaten that good in, well, ever.
The best kind of meal is one you catch for yourself.
Azura's eyes glittered with pride as she said this. The fledglings conversed, but Althea didn't join in. She could barely hear them because her ears were fine-tuned to the sounds coming from the hole. She couldn't quite place her finger on it. She stood up and everyone fell quiet. Seeing the troubled look on her face, Ameera spoke.
What is it?
Althea's eyes remained fixed on the hole, even though she addressed Ameera when she spoke.
There's something in that part of the cave.
The sound of Flynn's sword unsheathed from its scabbard echoed off the walls of the cave.
I'm right behind you, Wildcard.
She heard him say, his voice low. Feeling calmer, she had backup. Althea inched closer to the hole until she could almost peer in. She craned her neck to see what was inside, but quickly turned to the entrance of the cave when she heard a loud roar.
7 hells.
Neolani muttered under her breath as all the fledglings rose to their feet. There, by the entrance of the cave, was a titan gorilla. It stood about 15 feet tall, its fur black, though it had peculiar red markings all over its body.
I think this cave was already taken.
Flynn commented as he tightened his grip on his sword. The gorilla banged its fists against its chest before it charged at the first fledgling it saw. Ameera, the elementalist, lunged out of the way and pulled her bullwhip from her belt. It was a versatile weapon, one she struggled to master at first. She struck the beast, who recoiled, but attacked once again. Althea unsheathed her daggers and wanted to join the fight, just as the other fledglings had begun to do already. But the sound from the hole got louder, so she found herself drawing towards it instead. The fledglings could hold their own against the gorilla. The fledglings and the gorilla went back and forth, but it was different than the fight with the bear. They were wiser this time. They knew not to underestimate the titan creatures. Bayard held the edge of his blade and neared the gorilla. He knew using his powers was risky, but he couldn't risk losing anyone. He willed time to slow to his leisure. He took in the scene before him as it unraveled in slow motion. Althea was craning her neck towards the hole. Flynn was nearing the gorilla with a raised sword. Ambrose was barely managing his axe in his left hand since his dominant hand was broken. Azura was ducking under an impending hit from the gorilla. Neolani had her spear raised, and Ameera's whip was seconds from the titan's face. Moving with liquid velocity, Bayard scaled the beast, mounting it at the shoulders, a feat which would have been difficult without his ability, considering the creature's size and volatile movement. He held his blade in his hand, just as he saw Althea turn her head from the hole. Having seen what was inside, he could see by her facial expression that what she saw was important. The tip of Bayard's blade grazed the titan gorilla's throat, but just as he was about to kill the beast, from the corner of his eye, he saw Althea's mouth contort slowly into a pointed shout.
Wait!
Bayard normalized time once he realized what Althea had said, and paused with his blade inches from the gorilla's throat. Once it knew what was happening, it threw Bayard off with ease. He landed on the ground, but rolled once and effortlessly stood up. Althea's throat tightened as she looked at the gorilla, her heart pounding loudly in her chest. Everyone had stopped attacking, but they were looking at her in confusion. The gorilla roared and beat its chest, but stopped when Althea stepped forward. Instead, its roar faded into a whimper. Althea felt an emotion wash over her that was not her own, but could only be the gorilla's. Distress and protectiveness.
I know you're afraid,
Althea said, though her brain had not willed her to do so. She stepped forward, and the gorilla bared its teeth. though it didn't make a move to attack her. Its arm was stained with blood from where Flynn had sliced it. Its eyes found Althea's, and they shifted from black to a bright emerald green for just a second before they were black once more. Althea had not known that the same color glazed over her own eyes for just a second. Flynn dropped his sword in disbelief, and the sound echoed and ricocheted off the cave walls. There was an inexplicable understanding between the Titan and the healer, one that caused them to walk towards one another. The feeling in Althea's chest washed away and was replaced with comfort instead. Nobody dared to interrupt the sacred moment happening between beast and human.
You're safe now.
Althea's voice soothed the gorilla, and it relaxed so that its knuckles were firmly pressed against the floor. When Althea reached it, it let out a soft groan. Question, almost. Althea seemingly understood and nodded her head.
Nothing's gonna happen to you. Any of you.
She held her hand out, and as if trusting her, the gorilla leaned into her touch. Althea studied its face. It was a majestic creature. It had intricate markings of red all over its body, scars on its face from constant battle, fangs larger than her daggers, and minuscule horns on its shoulders. Althea found herself smiling softly at the Titan's beauty, though her smile quickly turned into a scream as she looked down at the gorilla's chest, where the tip of Flynn's bloodied sword had pierced through its heart. The sword disappeared through the other side, and the gorilla's eyes met Althea's. The healer watched as the life drained from its eyes. With a heartbreaking cry, the Titan fell to its knees before crashing into the floor with a loud thud. Only when the gorilla fell did Althea see who truly wielded the sword. Without thinking, Althea leaned next to the body of the gorilla and placed her hands over its stab wound, which was quickly spewing blood. With panic in her face, she applied pressure to the area as a familiar warmth spread through her fingertips. Though nothing happened, it was already too late.
What are you doing?
Ameera was the one to speak next, though when Althea looked up, her desperate and panicked eyes fell on Azura, who was still holding Flynn's sword.
She wasn't going to hurt us. She was fine.
Althea shouted before turning her attention back to the body and applying even more pressure. Her fingertips warmed even more, even to the point of burning, but still nothing happened.
Listen to yourself.
Azura sneered.
It's a Titan. One of the most dangerous threats. This was its cave, and you say it wasn't going to hurt us?
Tears of frustration blurred Althea's vision as she stood up.
She wasn't! She was protecting them!
She swallowed hard and shakily walked to the hole.
She? Them?
Neolani asked in confusion, eyeing the others to see what they were thinking, but they all looked as confused as her, save for Bayard, who looked pitifully at Althea. Althea climbed into the hole and shut her eyes tightly, allowing the tears to finally fall. She sucked in a breath and opened her eyes so that she could properly see the 4 frightened juvenile gorillas. They were huddled in a corner towards the wall, shivering and scared. Emotion swirled in Althea's stomach before they rose and sat in her throat, nearly choking her. These babies just lost their previously unbeaten mother to a sword that was shoved through her back by the people who invaded their home, and they were none the wiser. Humans truly were monsters.
What is it?
Althea heard Flynn ask as she lowered herself down onto her knees and stared at the frightened juveniles. Flynn climbed in after Althea, but his breath hitched in his throat at the sight.
Whoa.
He muttered.
Hey there, little guys.
Althea tried to keep her voice steady, though she failed. She held her hand out, and the gorillas tried to press themselves further against the wall.
I promise I won't hurt you. Here.
She suddenly had an idea as she quickly pulled her hand back and rummaged through her satchel for the last of her rations. She held it out to the gorillas, but only one stepped forward. This one had a green version of the intricate markings of its mother. Its essence was a mystery, just like the dragon back in Etta Jean. It held Althea's gaze before quickly grabbing the rations and running back to its siblings. They gawked over the rations as if they hadn't eaten in years before they devoured it within seconds. A laugh bubbled out of Althea's lips, and Flynn looked at her in surprise. It was the first time he heard her genuine laugh. It was hypnotic and beautiful. Flynn had to quickly shift his gaze elsewhere when Althea suddenly turned to him.
Get them some water.
She said, and her face was sad once again. Flynn didn't want to argue that they barely had any water left, or say something sarcastic like he usually would. To his own surprise, he wanted to give her whatever she wanted. Was this what it felt like to be Bayard? He nodded and left the opening. Althea vaguely heard him explain the situation to the other fledglings, though her focus was on the little gorillas. The second Flynn disappeared, the gorillas leaped towards Althea. She startled a little, unable to hold back her surprise. What was it with her and Titans? Titan gorillas were even rarer than Titan bears because they were peaceful creatures who mostly kept to themselves and avoided combat as much as they could. Althea examined the juveniles. They each had markings on their backs and faces, representations of their essence. One green, one golden, one red, and one blue. They couldn't be older than 7 months. Their mother was most likely hunting for food, and when she returned, she must have seen the fledglings in the cave. Althea assumed she was waiting for them to leave, but once she saw Althea near where her children were hidden, she sprung into action.
It's okay.
Althea sighed softly, though the sadness wouldn't leave her. She curled her fingers around the hand of the golden marked gorilla, and it squeezed eagerly in response.
Nobody here is going to hurt you.
Flynn's sudden return frightened the gorillas, and they pulled back quickly. The golden-marked gorilla had accidentally scratched Althea upon his retreat to the back of the wall, though she quickly pulled her hand away so that Flynn couldn't see. The cut was long, and it stung almost immediately.
Got the water.
The telepathist said. Althea turned to him and stood up. Without thinking, she held her hand out to take it, forgetting about the wound, though when she caught sight of her hand, she saw it was completely healed. It was strange. She had never involuntarily healed herself before. It was always by command.
What's wrong?
Flynn noticed her troubled expression, but she shook her head and took the flask.
Nothing.
She lied before turning back to the gorillas. She walked towards them with confidence. By now they understood that she wasn't going to harm them. They didn't cower in fear. Instead, they fought to get to the flask, as if they knew what it contained.
One at a time now.
Althea gently laughed as she helped them drink. Flynn stared at her, once again admiring her.
They like you.
When he said this, his lips curled up to a smile, but it quickly faded.
The others are debating on what to do with the body.
Althea froze at this before she stood up and allowed the gorillas to fight over the flask. She looked at Flynn with determination in her eyes.
Don't let them leave. I don't want them to see her like that.
She demanded, and he nodded half-heartedly as Althea exited the hole where she was met with bickering fledglings.
It needs to be burned.
Azura raised her voice at Bayard.
Nothing and nobody can track us if we do that. If something from the north comes across a Titan gorilla with a blade wound through its heart, it'll know we're a threat, and we'll be hunted down.
She's not a zombie or a grouse or a deer. Her children are with Althea as we speak. She doesn't deserve to be burned, she deserves a burial. Besides, a large cave fire might attract attention.
Bayard defended the dead Titan, and Althea's heart clenched. When Bayard told her he had her back not too long ago, he'd clearly meant it.
A burial will take too long, don't you
Azura
understand?
asked in annoyance.
We'll be digging for ages.
No, you will.
Althea's voice was cold as she addressed Azura. Every head turned to her.
You killed her, so you will bury her.
You don't tell me what to do.
Azura stepped towards Althea, but the latter only narrowed her eyes, threateningly. Her intimidating glare didn't affect Azura, though it affected everyone around her.
This was a beast who would have killed us the moment you two stopped having your moment.
Bury the body.
Althea repeated.
Or else?
Azura tilted her head.
What? You're gonna kill me? You need me.
Althea snorted through her nose.
I won't kill you, but I won't forget this. You're heartless.
How in seven hells am I heartless? I saved us!
Azura sneered, but Althea only turned her head to the dead gorilla. Her eyes remained on the stab wound in her chest, and the look on the gorilla's eyes before she died did not leave Althea's mind. Annoyed and indignant, Azura flicked her hand and flames sparked on the gorilla. Althea barely heard the argument that spun between the group thereafter, or saw the look on Azura's face, but her eyes remained on the burning gorilla. Bayard studied Althea's face, and how the flames that ignited around the dead gorilla reflected in her eyes. Although the flames in her eyes were merely a reflection, Bayard could see deeper than that. An eternal fire had been ignited inside her, and it was now growing. Her gray eyes were dark. They held fire, and they held storms, but they also held anger and grief. He narrowed his eyes slightly as he took in the vicious look in her eyes. She looked like a wolf on the verge of battle. Artificial Sun, Chapter 6.